Good afternoon and good evening, dear attendees. My name is Gulsum Kulsharova. I'm a founding member of Marie Curie Alumni Association, Central Asia. Today, we have researchers, students, industry professionals tuning in from Central Asia and Europe. Thank you all for joining the webinar. The webinar is organized by Marie Curie Alumni Association, in short MCAA, in Central Asia, and supported by MCAA in Europe. The purpose of today's meeting is to give overview and tips on Marie Curie individual fellowships and to share experiences of the members of our association about their time during their PhD and postdoc years as fellows. Before we get started, a couple of notes on Q&A session. You will be able to address your questions to our speakers after their presentations. Since we may have many people connected, if speakers won't get to answer your questions, you can contact us afterwards as well. I'm going to put up group's website and social media pages on chat in a bit. Now, I would like to give the word to my colleague moderator, Mustafa Shaurav, who is the chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and let him introduce our keynote speaker and moderate further. Please, Mustafa, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Gulsim. Thank you very much for organizing this event. As Gulsim said, I'm Mustafa, the chair of Marie Curie Alumni Association. I hope you all know what it is, but just a short introduction, who doesn't know. It's an international nonprofit association which comprises the members of fellows who have ever received Marie Skłodowska Curie action. The membership is free. As of today, actually, we have more than 16,000 members from 143 countries. So we basically work providing career development services, work on science policy, as well as communicate science for the general public. So if you are a member, please get involved in the association. If you are not and you are already a fellow, you can apply for the membership. So today's topic is basically how you can apply for MSCA fellowship. So it's great that we have expert, who is Theresa Lindl. She is the national contact point for Marie Skłodowska Curie action in Austria. She graduated in nutritional science, and after some working in private sector, she joined the Austrian Research Promotion Agency in 2014, and since then she has been acting as the national contact point for MSCA. Earlier, she was also involved in EU-Access initiative as well as different EU-funded projects. Currently, she is actually actively involved in several national contact points projects, including the Net for Mobility Plus. So this is her job introduction. For us, for MCA member, she is a friend, she is a colleague who helped the MCAA and Austrian chapter from its establishment. As a recognition of her efforts, MCAA board honored her as an honorary member of MCAA since last year. So Therese, thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Mustafa, also for the very kind introduction, and I'm happy to be here with you today. So hello everyone from Vienna, Austria. It will be my pleasure today to introduce you to the individual fellowships, and I will go through the presentation as to be sure to provide you with all the important and necessary information, and at the end we will have some time for questions and answers. So I hope that you can see my screen now, and yeah, let's get started. Yeah. So I will give you an introduction to the Marie Skłodowska Curie Actions individual fellowships. And then I would also like to give you some best practice in setting up a proposal. At the end, some tips and tricks, and as I said, some time for questions and answers at the end. So this is part of the text for the individual fellowships from the MSCA work program. And it says that the goal of the individual fellowships is to enhance the creative and innovative potential of experienced researchers wishing to diversify their individual competence in terms of skill acquisition through advanced training, international and intersectoral mobility. And as you can see, I've underlined some words here that I am going to explain during the presentation. Another section from the work program says that support is foreseen for individual transnational fellowships awarded to the best or most promising researchers of any nationality for employment in EU member states or Horizon 2020 associated countries. It is based on an application made jointly by the researcher and the beneficiary and the academic or non-academic sectors. So actually in these two slides, there is a lot of information in there that we are going to talk a bit more about in the following half an hour, I would say. So for whom are the individual fellowships? They are for the so-called experienced researchers. So you need to know if you are eligible to apply. Are you a so-called experienced researcher by the 9th of September 2020? This day is so important because this is the deadline of this year's call for the individual fellowships. And to be an experienced researcher, you either have to be in the possession of a doctoral degree, or if you don't have a PhD yet, at least have 4 years of full-time equivalent research experience. There are no age restrictions, a very nice thing with MCAA, and the nationality mostly does not count or is not relevant, with a few exceptions that I will explain to you. So if you have your PhD already, you are fine, you are eligible. If not, then you have to have at least 4 years full-time research experience. Now, what does this mean? The research experience is measured from the date when the researcher obtained the degree entitling him or her to embark on a doctorate, even if a doctorate was never started or envisaged. So this is the time where the clock starts to tick, so to say. As I mentioned already, it's a joint application between the researcher, the fellow, you, and the host institution in Europe, which is the beneficiary, meaning the institution signs the contract with the European Commission if you get funded. And the beneficiary, the host institution, must be a legal entity in the academic or non-academic sector, and I will come back to this. And it must be established in a European Union member state or associated country. And we mostly write MS for a member state and AC as for associated country. You will see this coming back often in my slides. So what you need to do is to get in touch with the host organization, with the potential supervisor at an early stage, and to ask for relevant information and the contribution from and about the supervisor and the host organization. You need this to be able to write a competitive proposal. And you will also need the so-called PIC. This is the Participant Identification Code of the host organization. And why you need this, I will explain a bit later. So an update of another program. I just have to delete this. All right, I hope nothing happens. Keep in mind the aims of the individual fellowships. And I will explain this more in detail later on. There is one rule you have to fulfill. This is a mobility rule. But beside this, it is also nice if you can show intersectoral and interdisciplinary aspects of your proposal or intersectoral or interdisciplinary mobility, if this is relevant to your project. This means that if you could combine some experiences, maybe not only in the academic sector, but maybe also in a company or a museum or a hospital or whatever may be relevant in your area. If this would make sense for your proposal, you have these possibilities, and also to combine different research disciplines. If it is not relevant to your project, no problem. Maybe you are really doing research in mathematics that is very basic research, then maybe it's not relevant. But you should think about if you could have such aspects in your proposal, it's something that you should point out. And talking about interdisciplinarity, now, which research topics are funded in MCAA? Well, the nice thing is that the program is a bottom-up program, so you can really choose your topic yourself. Nevertheless, when you register for the call, you need to decide for 1 out of 8 scientific disciplines or scientific panels. But this is just as to at the end then be for the commission to select the relative evaluation experts that they need to evaluate all the proposals. So where can you go and for how long? Basically, a very rough answer, you can go anywhere between 1 to 3 years. But to be more precise, it depends on the type of the fellowship, on the mobility rule that I mentioned, and sometimes also on your nationality. So I will explain this in the next slides. And to be able to understand the setups of the individual fellowships, you need to know a little bit about the geography, the country groups related to Horizon 2020. So the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions and the individual fellowships are part of this huge framework program for research and innovation called Horizon 2020. And here we have, on one hand, Europe in a wider sense, so to say, and this includes all the all the member states of the European Union, and also a number of countries associated to Horizon 2020, so called the associated countries. And just to mention a few examples, this is Norway, Turkey, Switzerland, but also Israel, for example. So it's not only Europe in the common sense, so to say. And all other countries not being a European member state or an associated country are called the third countries. So you have European Union, associated countries on one hand, and the third countries on the other hand. And this is important to understand the two different types of fellowship we have. So on one hand, we have the European fellowships. And with the European fellowships, you can spend 1 to 2 years in a member state or associated country. And besides spending time at your main host organization, you can also involve another or 2 other organizations where you can go for secondments, for example. So you can spend some time or up to 6 months at another organization, if this makes sense for your research project and for your skills development. And to make it a little bit more complicated, the European fellowships has 4 variations. We have the standard European fellowship. These are the most common ones. And for the standard European fellowship, we have a mobility rule. And this is a very, very, very important rule that you have to fulfill to be eligible to apply for the fellowship. And this mobility rule says that the researcher must not have resided, worked, studied in the country of the host organization for more than 12 months in the 3 years before the deadline. So this is the most important rule to keep in mind. Then we have 3 other more special panels. We have the reintegration panel, and this panel is for researchers that have spent some time already in a third country, so outside Europe, and is and wants to return to Europe. And to be eligible to apply for the reintegration panel, you need to be a national of a member state or associated country, or to be a so-called long-term resident of a member state or associated country, meaning that you should have spent 5 years in one of these countries before you apply. Then we have the career restart panel for people that have been out from research for a while and want to restart their career as a researcher. And finally, we have the Society and Enterprise panel if you would like to apply together with a host organization that is not academic, so maybe a company or another type that is not in the academic sector. Excuse me. Excuse me. So for these 3 panels, there is a relaxed mobility rule stating that you must not have resided or worked in the country of the host organization for more than 3 years in the last 5 years before the deadline. Sorry, I will just drink some water here. So in this case, the nationality plays a role. And the next call deadline, as already mentioned, is on the 9th of September. And it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time. And this is a really, really strict deadline. So you must be sure to submit your project until then. So that were the standard, the European fellowships. And then we have the global fellowships. And these have a duration of 2 to 3 years, split in 2 phases. So there is an outgoing phase from 1 to 2 years in a third country called the outgoing phase. And you have a return phase back to Europe, 1 year. Also here you have the possibility to include secondments in Europe up to 6 months. And the mobility rule for the global fellowships apply to the outgoing countries, so to the third country. So to give an example, if you apply for a global fellowship with Austria and Canada, so you're going at first 1 to 2 years to Canada and then back to Austria, then you need to fulfill the mobility rule towards Canada and not towards Austria. And again, here for the global fellowships, the nationality is relevant with the same rules. So either you are a national of a member state or associated country, or you are a long-term resident. And again, the same deadline. So also for the global fellowships, it's 9th of September this year. And I'm sure you are curious about the funding you will get, the contribution for the European Commission. So basically you have 2 different type of costs, the researcher costs and the institutional costs. So the researcher costs, they include the living allowance, and here you have a basic amount of 4,880 euros per month, and a mobility allowance of 600 euros per month. And if you are eligible for it, also a family allowance of 500 euros per month. And I will give you a few more details about this on the next slide. The institutional costs include the research training and networking costs for the project and this is 800 euros per month. And this money is really for you, for your project, for the research activities, but also for your training. So maybe you take some external courses. You can go to conferences, networking costs, and so whatever. So it should be used for you and your activities within the project. And then for the host organization, they will get 650 euros a month for management and overhead costs. And maybe to get a rough understanding of the total amount, the calculation is very easy. It is fixed on these fixed amounts that I just show you, and you multiply with the number of months, so the duration of the fellowship. So you have the living allowance, and here you need to apply a so-called country correction coefficient, and this coefficient depends on the country where you are going. And you have a list of all these coefficients in the work program, so you can check. This means that the amount of 4,880 euro per month can be higher or lower depending on the country where you're going. And these amounts, calculating this, this is a gross amount that you will get. So then they will deduct taxes, social insurance costs, and so far, depending also on the national rules of the country where you will be. And for the global fellowships, you need to apply two different coefficients, one for the outgoing and one for the return country. And this is just one example, just a part of the list in the work program, where you can see that Belgium has 100%, so this is 4,880, and then you have other countries being higher or lower than this basic amount. The family allowance is set if you are eligible, and here the status counts. This is the day of the deadline. So if you are married or have children, then you are eligible for a family allowance as well. And also the mobility allowance and the family allowance, they can be subject to taxation depending on the rules in the country of the host organization. And normally for a European fellowship, you have a funding of around 180 euros for the whole project, and for a global fellowship, around 270,000. So did I say it right? 180,000 and 270,000 euros, approximately. I would also like to mention that since a couple of years, there is a possibility to apply for extra support in cases where you have researchers with special needs. But this is done only after, if your project is selected for funding, and if you have some special needs, then you can apply for up to 60,000 euros, but this is calculated on real costs in this case. And I'm also sure you're interested to hear about the success rate. So what are the chances to get funded? Well, it is a competitive funding scheme. So yeah, you need to write a really good proposal. And as you can see, the success rates since 2014 have been around 13 to 17%. They were a bit lower in 2015 and 2016 due to a lower budget. But then, since then, the budget has been increasing, and still the success rate did not really increase a lot because also the number of submitted proposals have been continuously increasing since then. So last year, we had almost 10,000 applications submitted in whole Europe. And actually, this is the call in whole Horizon Europe with the highest number of proposals. For this year, the budget will be even a little bit higher, so around 30 million more. So altogether, for the two sub-schemes, we have 328 million euro. And then I would like to give you some, to talk a little bit about the best practice to set up a proposal, or to approach the whole thing, so to say. So we, my colleagues and I, we usually talk about the perfect match. And here we mean the match between the researcher, the host organization, and the research project as such. So it is very much about you as a person. It's an individual fellowship. So it's about you and your career aims. For this reason, the application should also go hand in hand and fit to your CV and to your career plans, and to match the profile of the host organization, as I said. So the aim of the individual fellowships, it's not only to do good research and to progress in this research area. It's also very, very important that you can show in the application how this project will contribute to your career development. So for this reason, it's also important to find a balance. On one hand, to show through your previous experiences and in your CV that you have the right knowledge and skills to carry out this project together with the host organization and the supervisor. And on the other hand, to show what new things you will learn within the project. And I will come back to this too. So try to think about at the start where you stand and how you want to develop yourself within the project. And think as early as possible about your ideal supervisors and the ideal research group. Then, if you are unsure, check your eligibility if you fulfill the rules, so that you have a PhD or the needed research experience and the mobility rule. And if something is unclear, you can contact the national contact point in the country, either where you are or where you plan to go. And I will give you the link to the NCPs a bit later. And if you are eligible, then get in touch with your host and the supervisor and check if they support your idea, because of course you need the commitment from the host organization for the individual fellowship. So what are the actions you need to take, the steps you need to take to set up the proposal? Well, all call information, all documents, the registration and the submission happens through the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. So this is a portal via EU login, and there is single sign-on for all services on this portal. So not only about proposal submission. And for that, you need a personal access, but this is really easy to get. You just go there and register with your own email address. So this is really easy. And the link for the IF call this year, you can find here in the presentation. And we don't have the time, of course, today to go much in detail about the proposal as such, but I will show you not least the most important documents you need. So on the link I just showed you, you will find the call text and all documents you will need to apply. Among others, the MCAA work program, which is one important document. You don't need to read the whole work program, but I recommend to read the introduction and the part about the individual fellowships. And then the most important document you need to apply is the guide for applicants. And here you really find all information you need. On one hand, all information that I give you today, you will have in text form in this guide. and also the structure and the template for the proposal as such. And as I mentioned, to be able to register for the call, you need the PIC number from your future host organization. After you registered, you can also download a template for the proposal, which is called Part B. And I really recommend to do this because then you have the right layout, the main headings, and so on already in there. Of course, you also have some instructions about font size, the characters, and footnotes, etc. And all this information can be found in the guide for applicants. So I will not go into detail about that today. Well, now I said a couple of times that you should get in touch with your host organization, with the supervisors in time. But how to find a hosting organization? There are some different possibilities. You can find partner searches on the link I already showed you. But I think the better way maybe is on one hand the Euraccess initiative that was already mentioned by Mustafa in the introduction. So here you have, you can find more and more hosting offers actually from different, mostly universities, but not only universities, also some companies that are interested in hosting an individual fellowship. And Euraccess is also providing a lot of other useful information, especially then if you really are about to move to another country, you can find a lot of useful information here, like entry and visa conditions, accommodation, taxation, and so on. Another possibility for finding host organizations is the Netphone Mobility Project, also mentioned in the introduction. They have a website where you can find the expression of interests, and you see the link here. And having this said, I have also to mention that most normally the really best way is to use your own contacts and networks to get in touch and to find a hosting organization. So this would be my first choice, the first way to go, so to say. And if you feel that you don't have these contacts, then it definitely is worth a try to look for these partner search possibilities or hosting offers. As Mustafa mentioned, I'm a so-called national contact point for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions in Austria. And people like me are, you can find in all European countries and also outside Europe. So you can find all contact addresses on the link that you can see here. So as soon as you have decided where you want to go, I would also recommend you to contact the NCP and to inform him or her about your intention to submit a IF in that country, and also ask about their services. Some NCPs offers, for example, proposal check services for free. So it's always good to have some information from the national NCP. If you decide to come to Austria, we have great support at many universities. So you can find the link here for all research support units at the universities under forschungsservice.at. And of course, you are also welcome to contact me or one of my colleagues also working with the Marie Skłodowska-Curie program. So this is Lil Raif and Jasmine Dorlak-Strauss, and you can find our contact details here. So the last third of my presentations, I would like to provide you with some tips and tricks, so to say. So maybe two challenges. As I think you could understand from my presentation so far, it's not only about to describe the research project, the research work as such, but also about describing yourself, your career ambitions, and to include a related training plan in the application, and also to put this in the context of the host organization. So again, the perfect match, so to say. And the second challenge is to fit everything of this into 10 pages for the 3 main sections of the proposal. So we won't have the time today to go very much into detail, but I would at least like to show you the structure of the proposal as to have a first impression. And our most important recommendation when you start writing your proposal is to really follow the structure and the headings as indicated in the template. Now, why is this so important? Because the structure goes hand in hand with the evaluation criteria. And without going through them all, you can see here that the evaluation criteria are structured in the main sections: excellence, impact, and quality and efficiency of the implementation. And putting the structure on top of this, you can see this follows exactly the structure of the evaluation criteria. So each section of part B is important. It's a competitive program, so really not focus only on the excellence part where you have to describe the research work, but also the impact section and the implementation section. So as I mentioned, the 3 main sections, excellence, impact, implementation, must fit into 10 pages. And try to think about of these 10 pages as a story. So try to tell a story as a whole text to read from start to the end, and try to take the reader, the evaluator, on board in the introduction, showing very clear the relevance of the project and the objectives. And think about what you want to learn through the project and how you want to proceed in your career. And you need to describe all you have to say in the text, so it's not allowed to refer to any information sources outside the proposal. Then, of course, we have the CV. And as mentioned, really try to make it relevant to the project you apply for. You should also describe the host organization or organizations if you apply for a global fellowship or if you include secondments. And also here you should make sure to make the description relevant to your project. So, for example, the supervisor's scientific expertise, the supervision experience, infrastructure of the host organization, participation in projects so far, and so on. What we unfortunately see quite often in applications that we read is that the host organizations, they send a very generic description to the researcher, to the applicant. And this does not give a very good impression. It's not convincing for the evaluators. So also here, it is really important to adapt the description of the host to your application. Then we also have a section about ethical aspects. And for the global fellowships, you need a letter of commitment from the host organization in the 3rd country. And of course, the first thing that the evaluator will see is the title and the acronym of your project. So try to think about something that tells a little bit about the content and is also easy to read and to remember. So the acronym is also important in that way. I would just also like to give some examples of training activities because, as I mentioned, of course, it's very important to have a good research project. So you need to have a good and innovative research idea that you need to describe. So this will be the main part of your training. So training on the job, training through research. But beside this, you should also describe other type of training. And this could be developing yourself in your scientific skills, maybe not necessarily only in your core area, but also what will you learn from the group where you will be included, maybe new techniques, instruments, etc. It can or should also be about training in transferable skills or soft skills. I have many words for this. So just to mention a few examples, it could be about patent applications, about project management, about supervising or gender issues. And here again, it depends very much on what you think, what will you need for your future career. And if you already have a lot of experience in writing an application or presentation skills are fantastic, then you don't need more training in this. But try to think about what will gain your career development. And also connected a bit to what I said at the beginning, if relevant to your project, then point out the intersectoral training or experience you will gain. So if you are hosted in the academic sector and you have, for example, a secondment to company, then point this out. Or if there are interdisciplinary aspects in your project combining different areas, then also point this out in the proposal. Yes, and above this, you can also, of course, through the management of the project, if you are involved in this, then you can gain experience here, or also in the organization of scientific training, maybe teaching, communication, and outreach activities. And talking about communication and outreach, I would just like to highlight this because this is a section of the proposal that is sometimes a bit difficult, I have the impression. So dissemination is not the same as communication. Dissemination, at least within the frame of Horizon 2020, is targeted at peers. So to the scientific or the wider research and innovation community, also to the industry or other commercial actors. And some typical examples, this can be papers at conferences, publications in journals, and so on. And this is to be described in the impact part, section 2.2. Communication is targeted at the general public to create awareness about the general public about the project, your project, and its results, and the implications for citizens and society. This could be press articles, participation in different researchers events, for example, the European Researchers' Night and so on. And this is getting more and more important because the European Commission needs to show to the public that it is important and worth it to invest taxpayers' money into this program, because at the end it's taxpayers' money and they should gain something out of the research that is funded in this program. So I will just quickly go through here, think about these things, and also try to do your best in this section, because as I said, all the section counts in the evaluation. So don't be treated in a less important way, so to say. And what we often see is that also this part is too generic. And this is true for the whole proposal. Always try to be as specific as possible. So try to avoid some general descriptions. Explain as far as possible in detail how you will do things and give examples. And to the text or the whole layout of the training, also make sure that tables or figures that you use are embedded in the text and explain them. It's nice to have tables and figures, but of course it should really be easy to understand and make sense. Be consistent in the terminology. We often see mistakes here. So if you describe something in section 1, for example, your work packages or some events that you plan, then be sure that you have the same wording about these happenings or the work packages titles, for example, also in the rest of the proposal. Right. And maybe you know that we are coming to the end of Horizon 2020. It will end with the end of this year. So this deadline for the individual fellowships on the 9th of December will be the last one within the current framework program. But fortunately, there will be a next framework program for research and innovation, and the name of this program will be Horizon Europe, which should start at the beginning of 2021. We may have a bit delay here. And in this program, the MCAA will continue, the individual fellowships will continue, probably with a new name, postdoctoral fellowships. And we don't know about the details yet. Most probably there will be some changes, maybe with regard to eligibility, etc. So if you don't manage this year, or you rather plan to apply next year, there will be a chance for that, but be sure to check the new rules about eligibility, etc. So that was it, a little bit longer, I fear, than planned, but I think we still have some time for questions, and I will try to answer them, and I hope for some support from the organizers with this.
Thank you very much, Therese, for the wonderful presentation, just filled with useful details. Dear participants, dear attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them up on the chat window. Meanwhile, I actually have a question about the success rate. So you mentioned that success rates, they have been varying, right, since 2014. It seems like in 2020, the budget is a little bit higher this year.
Right, yes.
So I'm wondering what you expect how it would affect the success rate, or would it still same as the last year?
Well, it's 30 million more, so it's really kind of increase. But as I said, what we have seen, not only within the last 6-7 years, but also before this, because we have these kind of fellowships also in the previous framework program, is that the number of applications has always been increasing each year. So it could be again that we have an increase in the applications, but I hope that it will not be as high as the increase in the budget. And we could see last year that though we had an increase in the number of applications, it was not as big as the increase in the budget. So the success rate last year was a little bit higher. So this is what I'm hoping for also in this call.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess we'll find out soon. Dear participants, if anyone has any questions. Yeah.
There are actually a couple of questions already. So one was, how can, I think from Elizabeth, we can have more than one host institute? So this was one of the questions.
All right. So if we talk about the European fellowships, you have only one main host organization. This is the host organization, the beneficiary, who is also signing the contract with the European Commission and who has all the responsibility, the official responsibility for the project. So the money, the funding will be transferred to this hosting organization, this one main host organization, where you as a researcher will be employed and they will pay you. But then, as I said, you have the possibility to include secondments, or if you think that a secondment is maybe not necessary, but you just want to cooperate with another organization or more than one organizations within the project, you also have this possibility. So you can also go on short visits. So actually, you have a lot of possibilities and not so many rules, in fact. So if you have a secondment, then you have the possibility to really register them also in the portal. If you have more like short visits and different cooperations within the project, this is something that you describe in the proposal, but you don't register the organization as such. And yeah, so you have a lot of possibilities, but one main host organization for the whole duration of the project. And for the global fellowships, it's basically the same. You are always employed at the European organization, and the time you spend in the third country, of course, in this case, you need to know the outgoing host, because this host you also need to describe in the application. Yeah, but this is like a long secondment then, and you will be employed at the European organization.
Okay, there are actually a lot of questions coming. It's already, I think, close to 10. So one question, several questions were some of our PhD students, whether they can apply right now.
The PhD students, okay. So if they were awarded with their PhD before the 9th of September, yes, then they can apply. If not, then they would need to fulfill the requirement of 4 years of research experience that I explained at the beginning of my presentation. So either PhD already or 4 years research experience. And if they don't fulfill that at the date of the 9th September, they will have to wait until next year.
Okay, thank you. There were some questions whether the recording will be available. Yes, it will be available at the MCAA website. One question was, how do you suggest I decide how much help or assistance to ask from the potential host institution throughout the application process?
Thank you. It's a very important question. Of course, it depends so much on the commitment of the host organization and of the supervisor. And this differs a lot, of course. So I think that it's important to feel that you have the commitment from the host and the supervisor from the beginning, because even normally the researcher is the one putting the proposal together and writing most of the text. You depend quite a lot on the input from the host organization. So the better connections you have here, the better it is to get the information in time. And probably also for the research part, because finally you are going there to learn something. So probably you will need some input from the host or also here. And then I mentioned a lot of universities all over Europe. They have fantastic grant offices, so research supporting offices, where you also can get a lot of help when it's more about maybe providing information about career supporting measures they may have at the university, for example, or more some general descriptions. But for the scientific input and input about the supervisor and his or her expertise, of course, you need it from the supervisor.
Okay. There were, I don't know how much time we have, but there are a couple of interesting questions. One is whether the success rate is uniform throughout all the categories, for example.
Okay, it differs a bit. So, for example, for the global fellowships, there is a dedicated budget. Again, if your chances are better or less good, depends on the number of proposals. For the last year and also this year, the budget is a bit higher than it used to be. So, for the global fellowships, the average success rate was a bit higher than the average one for the whole scheme. And then it depends a little bit, but only a little bit, on the panel, the scientific panel where you submit. Basically, the chances are the same because the budget is spread to the different panels in proportion to the number of submitted projects. So there are only small differences between the scientific panels.
Okay. There was another question, if you can give any tips about the gender part of the proposal.
Okay, very nice question. Yes. On one hand, if your research topic has an element of gender issues, for example, in the social science or in the medicine, you should definitely explain this. This is something that you need to point out, how this will be taken into consideration. And then also in the impact part or the implementation part, it could be relevant. For example, if you are a female researcher working in an area where you have very little female researchers, then you can, for example, explain in the impact part how you will act as a role model when reaching out to the general public. So yes, there are some places in the application where you need to consider gender issues too.
Okay. Well, it's literally a lot of questions are coming, so I'm just selecting which are important. So a lot of questions regarding the eligibility, as Therese mentioned. If you are not a PhD, if you haven't received your degree yet, you need to wait, or you need to have at least 4 years of full-time research experience.
Right.
Another.
I could also mention in the guide for applicants, there is like a scheme, a schedule where you can check if you have these 4 years. So take a check in
Exactly.
the guide for applicants. There is an explanation on this.
Exactly. Another question was, apart from the proposal, what else is considered during the process of selection?
A part of the proposal, well, it's only 2 things that are checked. The first step is the eligibility. So do you fulfill the eligibility criteria? And then the evaluators will read the proposal as such, so part B of the application, and this is all that is evaluated. Nothing else is allowed to play a role. So it's your description of the project, and that's it.
There were 2 other, one interesting question was, are there ways to commercialize the project? What would be the result of the project? So I think in terms of IP, this is quite interesting. If you could shed light on that.
Yes, sure. So this is part of the impact, impact and the implementation part. In the impact part, if you see, and I mentioned that you have this dissemination activities and the communication activities. And under the dissemination activities, where you should show how you will communicate the project results to the experts, to your peers. In this section, you should also explain if you see any possibility to explore the results. Maybe have what to say, prototype, for example, and so if you see such possibilities to explore the project results, this is the place to describe it. And also in the implementation part, where it's about the management of intellectual property rights, you should include a brief explanation. You don't have very much space for it, but yes.
I think we are running out of time, and we really have more questions. But what I would do is I would collect the questions, and we will also share an evaluation form. So if the attendees share their contact details, we can basically answer all the questions during this process, and the recording will also
stay with you until the end. So if there would be time left at the end of the webinar, I will still be here.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Therese, for the nice presentation. So Gulsim, the stage is yours now.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Therese, again. Yeah, as Mustafa said, if you have any questions, you could address them towards the end, or we could collect and then get back to you. Now, we're moving on to the next part of our webinar. So testimonies from the former and current fellows, for this part, we would like to ask the attendees to save their questions for the general Q&A session after the remaining three talks. So first in line, we have Dr. Danielle Tosi. Dr. Tosi is currently an associate professor at Nazarbayev University, Kazakhstan. He's originally from Italy, and now he'll share with his experience during his individual fellowship in Limerick, Ireland. Please, Danielle, the stage is yours.
Thanks for the nice introduction, and particularly thanks to Gulsim for the organization of this part of the webinar. As you said, yes, I was originally from Italy, where I studied doing my bachelor, master, and PhD in engineering. Lately, I worked for about 1 year in UK in an industry, and that's the time where I applied for the Marie Curie. Thanks to the Marie Curie Intra-European Fellowship, which is the predecessor of the individual fellowship of the current framework, I spent 2 years in the Optical Fiber Sensors Research Center at the University of Limerick in Ireland, where I could develop my research into optical fiber sensors. I can give a brief testimony of the time as a Marie Curie Fellow, because that's a very peculiar postdoc position that researchers can take in a European institution. The very difference between a Marie Curie Fellowship and other types of scholarship is that the projects are bottom-up. So the candidate can develop together with the host university a project, which does not necessarily have to be funded through another grant. So it can be an individual proposal targeted for the specific researcher, or it can be an area of research that can be opened up with a researcher. And in general, that actually opens a lot of possibilities, because it gives researchers much more freedom in terms of the selection and implementation of a research project. For example, during my PhD, I have worked mainly in optical fiber sensors for mechanical engineering. And what I did during my Marie Curie time was to work on similar type of sensors, but for medical applications. So changing completely the focus of my work. And basically that was a successful part, because I'm still working right now on medical sensors in Nazarbayev University. So that was a very successful setup in order to open a new research project, which was very successful at the time. So the Marie Curie scholarship has also another particularity, because the researcher has his or her own budget in order to, for example, attend conferences or pay the publication of results or attend business trips or perform collaboration with other universities. So the universities in Europe in general allow a quite flexible implementation of the Marie Curie. So that means that the researcher has, as a matter of fact, a quite substantial budget on parallel to the structure that the university is already proposing to accomplish the project. So that flexibility means that the researcher has much more effectiveness at work. There is less paperwork and there is more attention to the daily research activity, which, as a matter of fact, is one of the big contributors for the success of the Marie Curie program. I remember at the time in Ireland, there was an investigation related to the research output done through several of the European funding schemes, and the Marie Curie has been one of the most successful one in terms of output per each researcher related to the amount of funding for the program. So that was basically a very good program, because it allows researchers to really work on research without having to overthink too much about many of the other aspects related to research. So at the end of the day, it's something that is quite peculiar, because most postdocs positions that researchers find, even on European projects, are tied to a specific grant and are tied to a specific time frame. So instead, the Marie Curie has much more flexibility, and it is a bottom-up project. So I would like to recommend all the potential applicants to really connect to the host universities that they have in mind, and work out a project that is of mutual interest for both, so that when the researcher is funded and comes to the university, already has a structure in place, and with a quick setup is already able to go and deliver and work. That is everything in terms of the success. So what I can say is that it was certainly a very important experience. In fact, after the Marie Curie, I was able to find my first faculty job at Nazarbayev University in Kazakhstan, where I'm still working right now. And the research topic that I developed through the Marie Curie is my current research topic. So now we have a very large research center with about 10 people working, and couple of laboratories well equipped to run the research that started during the Marie Curie. So it is a very good success story in terms of developing a new research area, because the Marie Curie actually gives the freedom to researchers to do that. So I do really recommend to young people with a PhD to apply, because the conditions of work are excellent, and because the possibility to work directly on the research with our own personal budget and own structure in place to be able to work is certainly making the difference between normal postdoc and a scholarship like this. So I do really recommend to consider the Marie Curie schemes as an important step forward in the career of a researcher, because it is certainly a formative years. I can say that what my outcome at the end of the Marie Curie and when I started were completely different. So clearly it has been 2 extremely intense years, and with a very high level of intensity and work, and it was very pleasant. So that's my short testimony. Of course, if you have more questions, please do not be afraid to ask, and I will be here to answer.
Thank you, Dania. I think thanks for the presentation. I think you have encouraged even more people to apply who may be still thinking and try to applying and hopefully win in the end. Dear participants, if you have questions for Danielle, please feel free to write them and type them, and we'll try to address them at the end of the webinar. Thanks, Danielle. Next, as our next speaker, we have Dr. Selbi Hanova. Selbi is from Turkmenistan. She was Marie Curie Fellow in the University of St. Andrews, UK, from 2013 to 2016. Please, Selbi, the stage is yours. We can't hear you yet.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you see my screen now? Just asking.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, excellent. So let me very quickly, I know that we're a bit of short of time, so I will just walk very quickly through my presentation, which is titled Scottish Journey with Marie Curie. So first of all, as the 2 previous speakers have mentioned, it's about motivation, right? So we have to be motivated to apply for this position, for the Marie Curie fellowships. In addition to the motivation, you need to do a bit of research, a bit of preparation. actually not a bit, but quite a bit. And my research was basically in preparation for the application took about a year, because I knew that I wanted to end up in the University of St. Andrews. I knew my supervisor ahead of time. I was in touch with her, and I heard about this fellowship, so I was constantly looking for the post that I could apply to. And luckily, as Teresa has mentioned, it was a perfect match where I found basically both the supervisor and the institution and the program that really all came together in 2013 when I started my PhD in international relations with the University of St. Andrews. And here is the website of my ITN, International Training Network. This is called, the whole call for this Marie Curie Fellowship was called Post-Soviet Tensions. And it had 6 different institutions in it, the University of Dublin, Dublin City University, University of Bremen, University of Oslo, University of Warsaw, University of St. Andrews, and the University of Bremen. And we had, I think, about 4 different institutions, such as Levada Center in Moscow. We had CR Research and Consulting in Kyrgyzstan. So we have this network, both of academic institutions and professional institutions, consulting or like research institutions, where we could have been seconded. Now, just a few words about my thesis. I was looking at the regional cooperation in Central Asia, and just not to bore you any further, it's just I'm giving you the title of my thesis, which is called Understanding Central Asian Cooperation Through the State Narratives, Cases of Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan. Of course, just to again walk you through my experience, University of St. Andrews is an idyllic place. It's called bubble among the graduates of the university. Indeed, it is a bit of an ivory tower bubble located in a very picturesque and nice place of Scotland. It ranks usually 3rd after Oxford and Cambridge, but in certain area it's placed even better than Oxford and Cambridge. So that was my first year of PhD. Of course, the usual day of the PhD student is not like you see in the previous pictures. It's a lot of work, and as Daniel has mentioned, it's a lot of work actually. It's like daily you have to master your research, you have to be ahead of your time, you have to be innovative, you have to sort of be among the pioneers in your field. And what was the beauty of my research or the whole experience was that I have finished it in 3 years. My PhD was finished in 3 years. I had a 1-year-long fieldwork and a very exciting fieldwork. So one of them was in Kyrgyzstan. I was there with, I was seconded to the professional organization, the research organization called CR, Research and Consulting. Where I got to participate in a lot of activities, where I was also taking advantage of this networks where I could get my data. And of course, the second case was Turkmenistan. It was my home country, so I hadn't got to do a lot of interviews, but data collection was immense. Fieldwork and events, as again previous 2 speakers have mentioned, there were disseminations. So basically, I was disseminating the results of my research, but also disseminating information about Marie Curie as well, the fellowship itself. That allowed a wide range of opportunities. Both in the region of Central Asia, but also elsewhere. So one of the pictures you see me at Times Square, I went to, closer to the end of my PhD, I went to Columbia University to present my paper at the annual conference on the studies of nationalism, ASN it's called, for those of you who are familiar. So again, lots of opportunities, incredible networking, but again, it all comes down to a lot of work. It's working on your theory and methods, working on your literature, working on your field work. It's trying to combine this academic work with academic events, and it's also combining it with a lot of writing. And of course, I put it in the last entry, a bit of imposter syndrome, because again, you may be quite experienced in your field, but again, choosing the best institution in your field may not necessarily be very accommodating in the beginning. So, and especially if you're pioneering a certain research, then there's always some feeling of imposter syndrome. But then at the end of the day, it's all worth it. And when you have your hardbound copy of your PhD thesis, and in this case, you see me with a picture of a postcard that you normally get in University of St. Andrews upon submission, this 3 years come to a very happy moment, you know. And the results are fantastic because you have a PhD degree. I mean, in my case, I have a PhD degree from one of the best universities in UK. I have a network of people that I have come across through this PhD. I have a set of skills that I have developed, and I'm not going to go into detail because the skills are very broad. It's not just academic skills, but it's also a lot of professional skills that were enhanced during this whole experience. And of course, a third very important area is it opens, and by that I mean it does expand your career further, because now you're connected to a certain academic circle, but now you're also have opened a door to a very interesting area of research and consultancies. And of course, it's up to you at the very end if you end up choosing academic or industry. In my case, I sort of went back to where I came from, went back to international organizations. But again, with the skill set and with this experience, the journey becomes even more interesting. And that's basically it. I think I managed to squeeze my presentation in less than expected time. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sylvie, for the great presentation. I think that was a perfect example of overcoming challenges and the imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome is probably an indisputable part of any PhD. So thanks so much. Next, we have a current PhD student, Elvira Hayrulina. She's an architect and urban planner. Elvira got her master's in urban planning, and she's currently doing a PhD and Marie Curie fellowship at the University of Valladolid, Spain. Please, Elvira, the stage is yours. We can't hear you yet.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to share my screen.
Sure.
Gulsum?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Now. Thank you. Okay. Do you see it? Do you see the presentation?
Yes, you see it.
Okay. So good afternoon, dear webinar participants. Today I would like to share my experience in Marie Curie scholarship. As I'm current student, so I'm still studying, and maybe my experience will not have this kind of retrospective vision, and it will be more emotional, but I still hope that it will be helpful. So I have a double degree PhD program under the Marie Curie scholarship. It's called Urban Hist. It's dedicated to history of European urbanism in the 20th century. So first, I would like to start with my career, to talk about a little bit. So I'm an architect. I have a bachelor in architecture, and I also got an Erasmus Mundus scholarship in 2013, a 2-year master degree, a scholarship. And then I worked various years as an architect and an urban planner, as a teacher at Eurasian National University. In 2017, I received a Marie Curie scholarship for my PhD research. I didn't know about this scholarship. At that time, I just was looking for different scholarships in order to continue my research. One day I received an email from my master degree program professor, and he recommended me this program. And I applied to the scholarship in November 2016. There were 2 stages. First was based on the document evaluation. Second was an interview. And I got my final results in January 2017. So overall, I think it took about 5 months, and I started my research at the end of April 2017. What can I recommend in the application? Maybe just to write interesting story about yourself and to explain the research outcomes in a broader perspective, explain its long-standing benefits of your research to the society, to the society's problems and issues. So I think it's very necessary when you think about your research. Then, of course, ask help from the experienced writers and the researchers in order to make your application perfect and excellent, because as Teresa mentioned, this scholarship is very competitive. So let's continue with my experience. When I came to Valladolid, to Spain, I discovered that there will be more 14 early stage researchers from different countries. I think it was a great opportunity to share cultural similarities and the differences. I think it's one of the strong points of the Marie Curie scholarship. Every 6 months we had workshops. We had academic training activities. So I was in a constant learning process during the scholarship period. We also shared research results. We were not alone with our doubts and ideas. We had consultations and advices from professors, advisory board, partner organizations during these workshops. And the outcome of the workshops was a small newsletter where we could also share our experience and opinion. So here are all the fellows and the professors in one of the workshop meetings. So I also wanted to highlight 2 important points of in my research, but then I think that is also important to the Marie Curie scholarship in general. First is a transnational vision. In this map, I show all my trips which I've done during the 3-year period. I had 2 secondments, 2 academic secondments, one in UK, second in Slovakia, and then non-academic secondment in Germany. I also visited different conferences, I did archival research, worked in libraries, I did interviews and learned new languages. It was quite enriching experience to my research, because I could work with different resources, meet with different people, and to broaden the limits in my research. The second point is interdisciplinarity. which Teresa also mentioned in her presentation. During my research, I was encouraged not only to work about urbanism and the architecture, but then I also was encouraged to include different disciplines like geography, transport and the traffic planning, history, sociology, technology. This was very beneficial to my research because with that I could bring new vision on the existing problems and existing issues in my research topic. Apart all these meetings and travelings and secondments, I also had to do a lot of job. I needed to work hard. It was very intensive period. You need to change all your lifestyle. You start to do things with more quality in a short time. But then I think it works because Marie Curie scholarship give a lot of opportunities. So you just need to catch them and to work for your research. And of course, with that, you can succeed. That's it. I wish you to dream and achieve your dreams. Thank you very much for your attention and good luck with your applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elvira, for the presentation. Hopefully the diversity has encouraged more people to seek for PhD fellowships funded by Marie Curie Fellowship. Dear attendees, if you have any questions, we have time, unfortunately, only for a couple of them, I believe. And just since we're coming towards the end, I'd like you to fill out the feedback form. But meanwhile, there are a couple questions about the secondment. For the secondment, and this is open for any of our speakers, for the secondment, is the mobility rule the same as for the rest? For example, not residing in the country for 12 months in the past 3 years. Perhaps Mustafa could address this question, or Teresa.
I'd like to take it if you like. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So the secondment, for the secondment, the mobility rule does not apply at all. So the only precondition for secondments is that the host organization for the secondment is in one of the European member states or associated countries. So no, you don't need to consider the mobility rule for that.
Okay, and follow up on mobility. Mobility can be in my own country where I already work currently.
Yes, it could. It could, yes.
It could. So there are no restrictions on that part. Right. Okay, great. Apart from proposal, what else is considered? I think this has been answered. Am I right, Teresa?
Yes,
what else is considered during the process of selection?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I see one question about the signing of the grant agreement. Maybe this is good to know. Mm-hmm. So after the selection process, and if you get the grant, you sign within a couple of months, you will sign the grant agreement. And then you can choose different options when you would like to start the project as such. But normally you have at least up to 1 year before you need to start it. And in case of the individual fellowships, mostly you have even a couple of months more. So for example, if you submit this year in September, then you will have results approximately in February. And then probably you would have to start at the latest the year. So this must be year 22 in September. So you have quite a lot of flexibility and time until you have to start the project. You can start it earlier, but yeah.
Okay. That's definitely a plus for people who have some plans, maybe changing after getting the scholarship, so on. Dear participants, dear speakers, Unfortunately, the time of our webinar has come to the end. Our attendees, if you have questions, if there are any questions that have been unanswered, we'll try to get back to you. Please, and then if you have if it's possible, please, we'd be happy to hear your feedback about the event and let us know what kind of events you'd be interested in the future as well on topics, the webinars. The speakers, thank you very much for your time and for presenting and for sharing with your experience and about your knowledge about the Marie Curie fellowships, individual fellowships as well. Mustafa, thank you very much for answering questions and helping out.
If I may add the last point, Gulsim, just one point to all the potential applicant. Please do note that Marie Curie Alumni Association, MCAA, can help you develop your career. So you can actually integrate a lot of MCAA event during the proposal writing phase. For example, for the dissemination or going to conferences, you could include that. This would at the end help you basically to write a good proposal. Nevertheless, I would like to thank Therese and everyone, especially Gulsim, for organizing everything and all the speakers. So thank you and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.